Welcome to Sales Mavericks and Marketing Rebels, the show where bold business owners, savvy entrepreneurs, and sharp thought leaders push boundaries, challenge conventions, and redefine success in sales and marketing. And now your hosts, Nicholas Loise and Marco Salinas.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast of Sales Mavericks and Marketing Mavens. I am super excited today to bring to you the one, the only, the gentleman of all gentlemen and the master of all time management, Mr. Ben Glass. Ben, I was thinking about our relationship and our time together, and we've known each other forever. And I really consider you, and I mean this with all due respect, one of the nicest guys, one of the smartest guys, one of the guy that's kind of always has his core philosophy and you don't waver off of that. But you're also like a renegade. You're not only a renegade, but a Renaissance man, right? You're a referee. You're a CrossFitter. You're a father of 9 kids. You run a couple nonprofits. You run 4 different businesses that I know of. You're active in probably about 30 others, and you have a passion for, you don't go halfway. You go all in on everything that you do. So that's the most exciting thing I'm just excited about this podcast. But every time I see you on my calendar, I got a smile from ear to ear because I know I'm going to learn something, but I'm just going to feel better about life after I get done talking to you.
That's a very kind introduction, Nick, but I think that we make the point, often when I'm speaking from stage, I've got a diagram up of sort of the realms of my life. And with many of the blocks that you just mentioned, and what I say is it's really hard to have a bad day because there's always something that's going well. Of course, as entrepreneurs, we make things happen. We have challenges. We make messes. We make mistakes, all of those things, right? But when you have a number of things that you like doing and you are good at, and that's going to be different for every single person on the earth, but every single person on the earth, Nick, has that. They have the things they're good at and they like doing. When you have enough of those, there's always something that you can turn to. So it creates chaos. My wife, Sandy, I told her like, hey, I'm going to be on Nick's podcast and we're going to talk about the book. She goes, don't let him see your calendar. You're in a busy season. It's the fall. It's the conference season. So we're attending conferences. We're putting on conferences. I'm doing a number of interviews for the book, and the high school soccer season started. The private school season started. So I have a game tonight or this afternoon, actually. So it's compressed, fun life. But I think the point is like, okay, we got a lot of things going on that pretty much have been deliberately archetyped to be stuff that I like doing and that I'm pretty good at or really good at.
If you think about, so we're talking about the book, No BS Approach to Time Management, right? You co-author Dan Kennedy, the greatest business thinking mind out there. Somebody that is, I believe, one of the most maniacal people about his time, right? He is a stingy with it, but also generous with it. When you're one-on-one with him, the good news about him is you got him. And I think this book is intriguing because for entrepreneurs, if I go back to my days at GKC, Magnetic Marketing, all the number one program for all entrepreneurs is time management. We as time managers, as entrepreneurs, we got ADD, right? We run to the next fire. We've got 1,000 things going on. If you think about the arc of your entrepreneur career, all the stuff you have going, have you always been maniacal about time management, or did it kind of have to come out of a byproduct because of everything you do?
Yeah. So one of the things Dan and I talked about recently on my podcast, so I got to interview him for an hour on my podcast, and we both said, hey, we had those little boxes from, I can't think of the name of the company now, like 30 years ago. There was
Daytimers.
Daytimers.
You were talking about the Daytimers on your podcast.
I have the first decade of my professional life still in little boxes in my home office.
Okay.
So I've always been interested in that. But I think when we go a step higher, the book is great. It's got strategies, tactics in it. But the deep reader, Nick, is going to understand that this is a philosophy book. And the philosophy is this: you have one life to live. It's a one-way journey, beginning, no control over who you're born to, into what circumstance you're born. There's an end date for everybody. We don't know when it's going to be. We can affect it maybe by life choices. And it's meant to be lived for your happiness. Like, it's not, your life is not meant to be lived in misery. So how can we archetype or build, and this is what Dan and I are really good at, building structures around us of people and processes and rules that serve us. Now, if you only heard that clip, you would say, oh, these guys are selfish assholes. But the reality is, Nick, is that when the entrepreneur is good, himself, herself, spiritually, emotionally, physically, they feel like they have, quote, time under control, that's when they are best for the world. So they're serving their customers, their patients, their clients, serving their team. The guys and the gals that understand that we give them permission to archetype a life, like design a life that serves you first, because that's the life that serves the world best. And it's not selfish in a greedy way, but it is selfish in understanding you are the freaking racehorse. And if you're not good, it doesn't matter how good your team is, how good your systems are, how much your clients, patients, customers want you. If you're not good, then you can never have the best of win-win relationships, is the way I would put it.
But young Ben, out of school, right, starting his family, starting his law career, did he have this philosophy, or did it evolve over time?
No, it evolved over time because, look, like many young professionals, excuse me, you are told this is how the world is for lawyers.
Sure.
You are told what to do and how many hours to do it. And in fact, much of your early lawyer life is measured not by the quality of your work, but by the number of hours you can bill, like silly nonsense in retrospect. And there's nobody in law school teaching what you and I are talking about. There's nobody out there in the profession, in the traditional lawyer conventions and stuff, talking about this. They all talk about happiness or sadness and depression. Like, that's their benchmark. And so it really took, for me, it was Dan introducing me to Atlas Shrugged.
Okay.
And because Dan, as I was learning and getting introduced to the fly, I'm like, no, this is crazy. You don't understand. My business is different. I'm a lawyer. Like, here's our rules. Dan's like, no, wait, there's actually no rules. The rule makers make the rules, like, just to make this stuff up. Oh, read Atlas Shrugged first time, 1,100 pages, took me 3 months, a slow reader. The prime mover serves the world when he or she is working in their zone of genius, right? Doing what they like, what they're good at, and what they like doing. Oh, that's interesting. And then, Nick, I started to look around, and as you know, and Dan Kennedy, in that world, there were mastermind groups, and
Sure.
So for the first time in my life, I was hanging out with people who weren't stuck in the mud, boring, negative lawyers. I just made a whole bunch of friends, I'm sure.
You did. Well, I don't know. I think we mostly have entrepreneurs on our listeners, and their arch nemesis sometimes are lawyers. So you may be okay with our group.
We're good. Yeah. And so, but I started to hang out with people who, like, no, dude, like, your job is to find your zone of genius, to find the thing that you do really well, and then get other people to do the other things, develop processes and systems to do the other things. So for me, as a lawyer, Nick, it's like the time I spend thinking of the creative solution for the client or the opportunity that the client's legal situation is presenting. That's what I'm paid to do, to think creatively. If I can surround myself with rules of engagement, people who will enforce the rules, people who will get all the other stuff. There's a million other things that have to get done in a legal case, right? All right. And surround yourself with people, Nick, who like doing that stuff.
Sure.
And in today's worldwide economy with technology, we have 7 people working for the law firm full-time in the Philippines for us. in addition to our in-house. So we have 23 people under roof now in the law firm, 6 or 7 in the Philippines working on our time zone. And they're fabulous because they're doing things that they were born to do.
I find that fascinating. Most of my team is in the Philippines, as you know, because we've done a little bit of work together. They're in the Philippines. Work ethic is phenomenal. The production is phenomenal too. But the one thing you said that I think all entrepreneurs, small business owners need to think about, and the reason why they all need to get the book. So, folks, if you haven't got this book, go to Amazon right now and get. Now, I want to make sure I get the edition correct. It's the No BS Guide to Time Management, edition number 4. So get the one with Ben Glass because you get his philosophies in that. There's a ton of there, as with anything on Amazon, there's a ton of different ones. Get this one, which is edition number 4 on Amazon. We'll put the link in the show notes for people. But you said something very key that I want to go back to, because we could talk about all the time management tricks. There's a lot of stuff out there. But to me, your secret sauce is, you said this is really a philosophy book, a self-governing book, a modus operandi book, if you will. And even Dan sneaks in a couple chapters about Maxwell Maltz, right? And peak performance in that. And you do too. And, the number always on the top 10 books for all small business owners is Atlas Shrugged, right? So we could go into that philosophy too, which you talked about. But I'm sure you get, because you do a lot of coaching. You do a lot of coaching with small business owners, but also with attorney entrepreneurs, right? Small owners of small law firms or mid-sized law firms. How much do they fight you on this? That you're the zone of genius. You're the production person. If you think about, you're in Atlas Shrugged. You're John Galt, right? So how much do they fight you on these philosophies?
It depends on what group you're in front of.
Okay.
So if I was invited to speak to a normal bar association group, which I'd probably turn down the invitation, frankly, then that's a hard crowd. Oh, Ben, you don't understand. Like, this is a calling. We're here to serve everybody and blah, blah, blah. When I speak in front of entrepreneurial groups, and Great Legal Marketing has been going for 20 years, but today, as you know, Nick, there are any number of great rooms that entrepreneurial lawyers can be in. They, by and large, are there because they're at least drawn to the idea, not heard this before, or I have heard this before, but I didn't know who to hang out with. Okay. Oh, here's Ben talking about me giving myself permission as a lawyer to design a life around me. That's interesting. And so then what they go, like the little bird of their own training and education, is like, no, that's not the way we do it in legal. And so I think those lawyers who come, Nick, who are curious, and when they see somebody like me, again, very kind introduction, Dad to 9, do a million things. And I say, look, if this goofball can do it for 40 years, practicing law for 40 years, refereeing for 50 years now, if this guy can do it, maybe there's something to get from it. And here's my superpower, Nick. So if I talk to you and you're running a small law firm, and I can get a good picture of where you are, and you have a good picture of where you would like to go, my superpower is helping you decide where to invest your next hour or your next dollar. Like, what's the thing, a coach, a strategy, a technology, a mindset book, like what's the thing that will move you forward? Because as you know, like, being an entrepreneur is oftentimes a lot of incremental steps. It is mostly, I think, a mindset challenge, right? It is opening, as Dan would call it, having open architecture about your business, about your life, and then seeing, oh, here's 5 other people that have done this, that are a little bit farther along the path than I am. And that was what I found so valuable, Nick, when I started to join the various mastermind groups and coaching groups back in the day that Dan Kennedy and GKIC had, where you'd be in rooms with people go, oh, wow, there's somebody who was in my spot 6 months or 18 months ago, but then they started to do this.
Yeah.
And now look where they are. And what I found, Nick, and I'm sure you've seen this yourself, is that entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, are by and large the most giving, sharing group, as long as we believe that you're here to learn, right? I spend an hour with you. I want you to go do something. Don't just waste my time.
I think you're spot on. I think they have a true abundance mentality.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So I think about Ben, and I think about your trajectory, right, of entrepreneurship, and you kind of Dan Kennedy, but then you went to the mastermind and you say, okay, this is really, and I'm seeing what entrepreneurs are doing in other businesses, and you become a master marketer, right, if you will, for legal. And so you're smart enough then to say, and you listen to Dan and say, okay, now there's a business here. So was that your second venture, the Great Legal Marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I was dealing soccer uniforms out of my locker in high school before.
Okay, right, okay.
But so that was my first one. And refereeing was a venture from the time I was 16. But as a business venture, yeah. So I took what Dan was teaching about advertising and marketing, because back in the day when I started, it was like, how do you make a better Yellow Page ad? And started to do things in my practice to help show up differently. And then Dan and his partner at that point, Bill Glazer, like, well, you should, there's a second business here if you want it. And back then, literally, there was like only three of us.
Yeah, you're the OG in that space.
Today, there's 3 new ones every week.
Three started as you and I got on this podcast with Marco. Exactly. And they're all 25-year-olds, and they've never had a law firm, but they're all gurus of marketing a law firm. But
yeah. So my son Brian and I we're still full-time practicing attorneys. We like what we're doing, and that gives us, we don't have the whole market, but we do have this space that. So our lawyers, Nick, are those who aren't typically spending tens of thousands of dollars a month on any type of advertising, whether it's online or offline. They're mom and pop. They're mom and pop building businesses.
And do you think they come for you for the marketing advice or the space, right? That this is a safe space and this is my group, my tribe, or I'm looking for a philosophy?
It's
and
interesting.
There's method to my question.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think years ago, most came for the marketing. We were the only ones out there doing this, right? And so, like, how do I get more clients? That's the question. I think more and more, I probably got 15 or 20 books out there in different realms. More and more people see somebody who's like them, dad, long marriage, reasonably sane when he's doing podcasts and videos, not a crazy guy, successful law practice. And they come like, oh, okay, here's somebody I can trust. Because one of the things today, Nick, there's just so many voices out there. And as you just described, like, some of them don't know what they're talking about, right? And trying to figure out, like, okay, who should I listen to and who shouldn't? So I think today maybe half of them come because they've either seen me mention in a book with Dan or read one of my books that are really philosophy books, more than, what size is the font you use in an ad books. And they go, oh, this is a guy I think I'd like to hang out with.
The reason why I was asking that question too is because this is actually, I think, a quote from Bill Glazer that I heard, that when you become the teacher of the thing, you actually make yourself better at the thing, because of the fact that you have to constantly be engrossed in what's working, what's not working. And you want to be able to share that with your students, but also you want to be able to use your practice, your private practice, you and Brian's practice has the test kitchen to say, hey, listen, we did these 5 things. 3 of these things work. 2 of them, we gave back all the gains we did on these 3, so don't do these 2. Mike, is that a correct assumption?
Oh, 100%. So, we learn both by doing it, by putting it into the marketplace, hearing not only our results, but other people's results. But then, what's interesting, Nick, when you run a podcast, like, there's a podcast born every 3.5 hours.
There is a podcast born, and there's 2 listeners, our moms, and now we got you and your audience, right?
But when you have a good one, you attract other subject matter and philosophical experts, and you get to talk to them for an hour. So most of the episodes on Renegade Lawyer Podcast are me learning something new, and I'm letting you listen in on the conversation that I'm having with my guest. So there is a method in that madness
So true.
as well.
So true. I do think podcast, I love teaching. I think you do too, right? I know Marco does. And, podcasts are a way to kind of be back at it. I used to teach at universities, and I was going to do the one right at COVID. I just don't think I could teach in today's university environment, right? There's just too much stuff going on. We'll leave that for a different podcast and a different conversation. But podcasts are that ability. And that's why we like to bring on really, really good guests. We're both from the Dan Kennedy School of Thought, the No BS School of Thought. So we're trying to bring on a lot of the alumni to that, because we had Parteef Shah on, who promoted your book along with 15 of his other books. But to know Parteef is to love Parteef. But if I think about you, and you are good on social media because you always kind of show, hey, here's how I'm working, here's what I'm doing. Some of it, I'm sure, is to promote the book or to promote other things. But at one time, you and I were talking about your daughter, which I think is one of your younger daughters, and about her skill set has an animal groomer, and you were looking at maybe setting her up in business. And I'm like, oh, this is a smart thing. You actually reversed engineer it. And so you were reading books not on how to buy a business, but how to sell a business, because you wanted to be 5 steps ahead to go back. And if you always thought that way, okay, I got to reverse engineer what I want to do to make sure I'm successful on it.
No, I think that's advanced learning, because when you first enter this world of continued learning, you're learning something, you're executing, you're testing, learning, executing. I think the older, so I crossed over, I'm 66. The older you get and the more things are running sort of semi-fluidly around you, you start to think. I had a conversation with my legal team yesterday, and something came up, and it was just about our marketing, and what if every person who called us got a copy of one of these books that I've written, which is a pure motivational book. And they're like, oh, that'd be really hard. I said to them, and I wouldn't have said this a couple of years ago, I said, imagine a world where every single person who calls us, we can change their life because we can get this book in their hands and it helps them. Because everyone who calls us, Nick, is got an injury or a sickness or some sort of illness, right?
Sure.
Otherwise, they don't call a firm like ours. So they have hard lives. And so it is a neat place to be. And I'll tell you the new learning, Nick, this year, as both Brian and I have gotten full-time executive assistants out of the Philippines through a company called Athena Go, is learning to be a really great delegator and learning to teach someone who knows nothing about your business how to be your second brain.
Yeah.
And for me, her name is Claire, and she's fabulous. And Brian's got one named Fred, and he is fabulous. Point though, at 66 years old, I've learned a ton. I just learned a ton of new stuff that I didn't even know this world was there. and so now, to your question, now more I think about what is the reverse, where do we want to get? How do we reverse engineer that? How do I get somebody else to set up the system that will do that for me? So again, I get to think into the creative space and surround myself with smart people who can do the things that they love to do. So a lot of the social media and stuff you see, or LinkedIn stuff, that's Claire now. Like, Claire is my second brain. And there's a whole nother seminar on how you delegate and get confident in delegating and confident in teaching someone who's on the other side of the world how to do your stuff, how to be your voice, right? But I'm proving that it can be done.
When you work, they do force you to think, right? Because a lot of times we go fast and furious, and we use idioms, and because I use them too. They're my VAs and they're like, can you have to learn specifically break it down. So you're okay. This is from a beginner's mind. Let's talk this through. And I do think that makes you think all the way through. We see that in selling. You, as the business owner, are the best person at selling your business, but you intuitively know what to do, right? So at step 5, you know that you got to do 16 things, but you're not good at teaching somebody how to do that, the salesperson how to do that. That's where we kind of break that down. All right. So we hit a lot of things. We hit, the book, right, which we want to make sure everybody gets. Go to Amazon, get No BS Time Management for Entrepreneurs version 4 or edition number 4. We'll have the show note links. That's there. If you are a wonderful, thoughtful, loving attorney, we only want good people in Ben's group, go to Great Legal Marketing, right? You have an event coming up. You always do a fall event. So do you have one coming up?
We do. It's actually, this is a busy season.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's in first week of October. It's in Phoenix. This week, Brian is speaking in Salt Lake at one event. Next week, I'm in Salt Lake at a different event. And then we fly back here, and then we fly back across the country to Arizona. So yeah, Great Legal Marketing Summit is this year, first week of October. We still have some seats there. I would say this: if you're a lawyer who can't answer these two questions with an enthusiastic yes, which is, do you love going to work and do you love going home? Like, if you can't say yes with enthusiasm, and you're running a small law firm or you're a solo practitioner, we're the space for you. Like, we 100%, 20 years of experience of working with people like you. We can help. We can move the ball for you and with you. I will say that, this does depend on the person you see in the mirror, but I can tell you that, hundreds, if not thousands, of lawyers of all different backgrounds, practice areas, cities, towns, levels of experience have come through our system and learned how to do this, like how to build a better life for themselves through the vehicle of a law firm that's not driving them crazy. And that's really, the number one thing I like to do is referee highly competitive high school soccer games with people screaming at me, which is weird, right? But the number two thing is inspiring people, Nick, to really better their lives, and in the niche of lawyers, and locally, and a lot of small businesses. I love coaching them when I have the time to do that.
Now, you do some work with small businesses, right? And I think your thing is, hey, listen, I got to eat lunch. You got to eat lunch. Buy lunch for me, and we'll do a Zoom, or you can come into the office, and I'll kind of share with you my philosophies. So they could kind of meet you halfway with that. I'd be remiss if I didn't do some more talking about the book. Is that okay?
Yeah, we're talking about the book.
How's Dan doing? First off, is he doing good?
Dan is Dan. He's full back. I said to him, you must be working a lot for Russell Brunson and ClickFunnels. He goes, no, not really. Not really. So he's just changed up his lecture style. It's more interview style than presentation because of his vision issues. The funny thing was, it was just over a year ago, Nick, Dan faxes me, hey, I'm going to do the 4th edition. Would you like to play? And I said, this is a busy time of year for us. I said, yeah, as long as, have some time. He goes, well, you have 30 days. 30 days. And so, the process was, I quickly read the 3rd edition, kind of outlined where I thought I could add some value and a different perspective. And that was just a couple of faxes back and forth and a 20-minute phone call. We were off to the races, with me writing the last parts of the chapters in the morning when I was in Orlando for my event last year. So that's how we got into the book. We talk about a bunch of strategies. I think when I read the 1st edition many, many years ago, it changed my life. I immediately instituted the no unplanned inbound phone calls policy, which my team told me would never work. And now we have hundreds of lawyers across the country have the same policy that I do. Like, if you want to talk to me, you'll be able to talk to me, but let's just schedule it. So we both know that, what we're doing, what we're going to talk about. And, I think, so that's a huge game changer strategy in the book. I think the other is the most probably practical strategy to implement, any business owner can implement, is this concept of time blocking, Nick, which is, we don't have to-do lists, right? If something comes up that we need to execute on ourselves or assign to somebody, we just mark it down on a piece of paper. But by the end of the day or by the next morning, that thing has to find a space in the calendar. And this teaches you a couple things. Number one, getting really good at estimating how long it's going to take you to do something, but also teach you that you don't have time for all this stuff. Because what happens is the calendar starts to get really filled up. My argument is, if that's true electronically, then how are you ever going to get it all done if you just leave it to ad hoc, oh, I'm going to get to it on my list. And so it starts to teach us to really value our time, to say no ruthlessly, which means we're paying attention. We don't have to be mean about it, but we're ruthless about saying no to a lot of things that aren't serving us, our teams, and ultimately our clients or our members. And it teaches you how to learn to delegate and then to trust. That's the other, and maybe lawyers may even be a little more antsy about this than other entrepreneurs. It's like letting go of that vine. Like, Nick, like nobody could write this brief as good as I could. Like no one could
Right.
do notes from the client interview as good as I can, which is objectively, demonstrably wrong, false. But getting lawyers to realize that they're not the best at everything, and it's not a good use of their time to try to be the best at everything. And they need to develop people and systems. Again, we're back to philosophy. Like, how do you? There's a whole nother podcast. Like, how do you build an enterprise where people love to come to work to serve the mission? They're excited on Sunday evening. Like, I think we've done a pretty good job here in doing that. But that's a science unto itself, and another thing that we spend a lot of time at Great Legal Marketing on.
That is a science on news. We have a close friend, Adam Whitty, and he wrote a great book, which is Looking Forward to Monday, right? Which I think is one of the best titles of a work environment book I've ever heard. I have to ask you this one question. I don't know if you wrote this chapter or Dan did, because I think I suffer from it occasionally, but I think the entire world does. As I've traveled, and I was just at the Boston Red Sox game with my wife and friends, and most people are on their phones. Nobody's looking at what's going on in the field. How does one kick the social media addiction?
So one of the things you can start simple. So I'm holding up my phone if you're listening to this on audio.
You and your lovely wife on the picture when I saw the screen shake.
Right. It's got no work email on it. Right. So that's not a distraction. It doesn't beep, buzz, vibrate, tingle, or anything else. And so sometimes, yes, I do show up at home without the milk I was asked to get, but that's life in the fast lane. And so you start there. You start by turning off notifications.
Yeah.
In my case, I now have somebody who runs my calendar, screens all of my email. So literally, probably yours too, like hundreds of emails a day, hundreds of emails. I look at 3 and we get to inbox 0 every night. Now, again, I benefited by hiring, teaching, training, and being trained on how to be a great delegator and how to trust somebody else to be able to do that. I think that the smart entrepreneurs are using social media outbound, right? I'm going to make that video. I had heart surgery 6 months ago.
Yeah.
That I would document the journey through video, through social media. And I've pretty well done that. But I would say, look, it's hard. Having something else to do that's fun, to just replace that urge. So for me, it's reading. I read 70 to 80 books a year, and then listen to others on Audible. But actually read physical books. Reading alternative newspapers and not like mainline press, like smart things. Those are things I like to do. Exercise, referee, all that stuff. So the social media addiction thing comes with being aware. Or your conquering of it comes with being aware of how much time you're actually spending, turning it off. I mean, turning at the very least, like the notifications and stuff off, and realizing that you don't need to engage in every conversation that's out there just because somebody has mentioned you. So there's a couple of ideas here, but you're right. This is a problem in America now. Side note, and your lawyer-hating friends will, appreciate this, but a lot of cars run into each other.
I mean, it's amazing to me. we're lucky we have a second home, a summer home, and we drive there. And sometimes I'm not at the wheel. I'm in the passenger side. It's amazing to me how many people are actually not engaged in driving. It scares me. I will never let my family be in a small car ever again after seeing that. But it is for the lawyers. It's got to be a heyday. And I see them on the street, and my worry is you got these scooters that are going by at 100 miles an hour, and people are down on their phones, and I don't even want to know how many things happen because of it. But I was just selfishly, I'm like, I became aware of it, and I'm like, oh, I read that, and I'm like, I got to ask Ben about that, because I'm religiously now, after reading the book, I'm deleting things off my phone, and I'm just going to use it from outbound.
Yeah, I would just say the work email thing, like no one has died since I took work email off years ago. Took that off my phone.
Yeah. I took Slack off. I'm going to work towards email, but I took Slack off for that reason.
That's so funny, because my team is like, hey, this went around on Slack. I'm like, dude, like we're never putting Slack on my phone, because that would just be one more thing. Like not happening.
I have to ask this last one, and everybody, you need to get this book. If you're, as we talked about in the beginning and the preamble, the No BS Time Management Program, I think it's still part of the GKIC or Magnetic Marketing library, was always the number one selling product, because entrepreneurs deal with time management. They don't have enough time. They want to know how to manage it, how to conquer it. I'm so glad you and Dan wrote this book. I agree with you. The softer, gentler Dan, I don't know if that's 100% true, but it's close enough. And the two yin and yang that you guys took to approach this book was phenomenal. If I want to apply the most powerful discipline, did you already give it to us, or is it a special thing that everybody should know so they could get the most done out of their life?
I think the discipline that will fundamentally change your life is the discipline of assigning things to time slots.
Okay, so the time block.
Having a beginning and an end to everything, and not letting anybody else interfere with what you have decided is a perfect day. Now, and I talk about this in the book, like team needs you, right?
Yeah.
Team needs you. So you simply block time for that. And so for those of you who are running teams, who have people who report to you, you say, look, Nick, you got questions, like write them down, batch them up, think of 3 cool solutions for each question you have.
I read that.
Give me a recommendation.
Yeah.
Because Nick, you're going to be right most of the time. And I want you to get more confident about being right, because you're a leader here. All right. And you don't need to ask me every question about every case that's running around you. I hired you because you're really smart. And so that does things on so many levels, besides figuring out your time, like you're building a team. So there's a part in the book that I wrote, which is all about how to really build a great team. I also wrote a chapter on the power of decision making, and sort of contrasted my methods with my lovely wife Sandy's, and which causes some discord. But I think I think entrepreneurs will understand that the faster you can make decisions, Nick, and get something moving, the better off you'll be, even if you're moving in the wrong direction. Like, okay, we can fix that, right? It's the start, which is so hard. And so we just want people to know, like, dude, I'm a busy guy. Like, I do have a lot of balls up in the air, but the planes aren't crashing. We're doing really well. And most of all, I can have fun. Like, I told Dan, there's very few things in my life that I have to do that I don't like doing. That can be engineered.
Well, I also think that you are we talked about your voracious reading. You're a constant learner. I mean, you were at Funnel Hacking Live. You said it was one of the best events you were ever at, right? You're constantly going to learn new things. I still can't believe your heart attack was 6 months ago. You look great. And you just did a competition, if I saw on Facebook.
Yeah. So I didn't have a heart attack, right?
I'm sorry.
Diagnosed obstructions, right? And again, the scary part is no symptoms, exercising heavily, routine screening. Oh, you need triple bypass surgery. Okay.
So did you get the CT scan? Is that how they found it?
That's right. We talked about
Yeah.
this. I had the coronary artery CT.
So if we
screen.
saved one person, if they heard this, go get the CT scan. I think it's like
Right.
$140, or sometimes you'll.
Right.
It's not expensive test. Yeah.
I saved a couple there's a couple of people now who've watched my videos. If you go to TikTok, Renegade Lawyer on TikTok, who got the screening, have had surgery. Now they had stents, not bypass, but they had surgery that probably will extend their lives. So yeah, that's a whole nother thing. And there's all sorts of literature on mindset and going into major surgery. And my mindset was I was going to have the fastest recovery ever documented for a 66-year-old CrossFitter and soccer referee. Note the very narrow niche that I'm now number one in.
In Virginia. No, right. No.
Yeah, no. And I did. I returned to the soccer field. I returned to the gym. My doctor was very happy and impressed. I said, just keep telling that story, because people need to know that, it's possible. And mindset, all of my stuff, Nick, all of my stuff is a philosophy book. It just is. Because if you don't have the mentality for this, the strategies aren't going to help you as much. Right? If you do have the mentality and you want to learn how to explode your gifts into the world, get the book. And then reach out to me, because I love talking about this stuff, as you can tell.
Yeah. Well, Claire only gave us 45 minutes, so I want to be respectful. I don't want her to get...
She's so protective of me.
Yeah. I don't want her to get in trouble, and I'm going to have to call you again for another one, so I want her to know. So we're 43 minutes in. It's been a joy. Marco, I know you probably have a question or two. We'll have to have Ben on. I'm going to pay some bills. If you want to jump off, Ben, how do people find you? We're going to put it in the show notes, but how would people find you? Amazon to go get the book. Once again, it's the No BS Approach to Time Management, edition 4, the one with Ben Glass. While you're there, click over to Ben Glass. Buy play left tackle, right? Play left half back.
Play left fullback.
Look at that. Have your kids read that one. It's not a soccer book. It's a philosophy book, as all of his ones. I know the Renegade Lawyer is a great one. It's a great philosophy of anybody running a business, but especially if you run a law firm.
New edition of that one coming out in October too.
All right. So we got the new edition. We'll have to have you on to talk about that.
Go on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn. And here's the other thing. If you have a kid who's a sports official, baseball, soccer, whatever, hit me up. I have a philosophy book for teenagers it's about soccer refereeing, but it applies to baseball and football, everything else. Hit me up. I'll send it to your child for free.
Good. Is the world of youth referee, is it getting better? I mean, are parents less, or is it still as bad as it was?
I think it's still as bad. I think it is so interesting. I'm 66 years old. I've got a pocket full of one-liners I can use. I love the challenge of calming people down. But it's there's so much money involved in youth sports. That's the real problem, Nick, is that if I'm paying thousands of dollars for my kid to play, I expect really good referees. And there's a referee shortage, right? My email blows up starting on Wednesday through the weekend. Hey, we need refs. So usually the referees that are showing up at your field are not being, you should know this, they're not being carefully selected for your kid's 13-year-old game. They're just not. They're raising their hands and saying, I think I'm good enough to let me come out and do this thing. Yeah. That's just life in the fast lane too.
Well, if that's the only problem we got, we're okay as a society. Ben, you're a gentleman, you're a scholar, you're a phenomenal man, phenomenal father. Thank you for your time of being on with us. I'm going to pay a couple bills. Yep. Shout out to our sponsor. Thanks again. Tell everybody I say hi, and good luck on your on the Great Legal Marketing event, which is in October in Phoenix. Yep. So enjoy that, and listen. Reach out to Ben. He's gracious with his time. Get his newsletter. You took out of what I'm reading. I used to. Every month I would have 5 different books to buy on Amazon because of that. So Amazon sent me a note saying your purchases are down ever since you removed that from the.
I'll have to give you my list. I'll have to give you my list, because there's some cool stuff. I'm rereading The Happiness Factor right now. It's written, I think, in 2010. It's a fabulous book. It's a fabulous book about designing your life. The Happiness Factor.
I'm getting that one.
The Happiness Advantage. It's an orange colored cover.
Okay.
All right, guys.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for everything.
Ben.
Take care, sir.
All righty. Bye-bye,
Pleasure.
guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't have a podcast, you got to get one. And there's nobody better than Pina Colada Media to be your host to help you get through this. I couldn't do what we do on this podcast without Pina Colada Media. And everybody should have a podcast, bar none. It's the most important thing you could do for your business. One is, as you just heard from Ben, you learn so much by interviewing people. If you're curious and you want to learn and you want to grow your business, you want to be a better marketer and a better salespeople, get a podcast, go out and just start inviting people to it, and you're going to learn from them. But also, it's the number one marketing tool that you could possibly have. It positions you as an expert. It shares your knowledge with the world, and it helps you reach those hard to reach customers. So if you want to put the number one business development tool that all the smart companies are using in this day and age, as we like to say, the cool kids are doing it, reach out to Pina Colada Media. They're going to walk you through it. You don't have to do anything. They do everything you possibly need. Pina Colada Media, your number one source for podcast. Marco, that was so cool. I love Ben. I could listen to him once a week. What did you take away from that podcast?
Well, first of all, Nick, amazing job with the questions. That's one of my favorite things about you. You ask amazing questions, and all of the questions that you presented to him were really spot on. So kudos to you for being such a great interviewer. You tend to kind of find those little hidden things between the lines that get missed a lot of times, and I think those are some of the most valuable golden nuggets. And you want to talk about a guy that has a lot of them. That's Ben Glass, right?
Oh my gosh.
The guy is he's just an encyclopedia of golden nuggets to share about these things. A couple of quick takeaways before we wrap up. I remember seeing Ben years ago, and one of the things that always stood out to me was, I think part of his USP with Great Legal Marketing was be home by 5 o'clock to eat dinner with your family, right? Something that is probably a point of contention for a lot of lawyers. Their wives, their kids still would like to have them home for dinner, but it's so easy in that world to say, you know what, honey, I'm going to be pulling another all-nighter. I'm going to be here again until 9, 10 o'clock at night doing this. And then you got to wake up early and you got to do that whole thing all over again in the morning. So what this guy is offering, there's a reason why Dan Kennedy came to him and said, I'd like for you to contribute, because he's been living that. He's been living that time management thing for a long, long time. He took what Dan taught him very early on. And, last week's show was Partiv Shah, a massive implementer, one of the most massive implementers you could ever meet in your entire life. And you know what? Ben Glass is another one. So if you get anything from this, make sure that you go and read that book. The book is huge. It's a big deal. It was a game changer for me also early on in my introduction to business, as well as, fortunately, I found Dan pretty early on. And it was the time management thing, I think, that really changed everything for me. Had I not found that, I think I would have probably gotten to a point of despising entrepreneurship, but instead I loved it because Dan gave me permission to create those rules.
Yeah. I thought it was telltale that he said it's a philosophy book more than anything else. And if you think about, I really think that he lives, obviously he lives by a code. He lives by a philosophy. If you listen, I've done a lot of different calls and podcasts with him over the years of his philosophy, which I think is phenomenal. He's a phenomenal human being. But I think for an entrepreneur, you have to have those rules and you have to have that code. And who's to say that you can't? Who's to say that you can't live by them? You can't be home, right, at 12. You can't go to the baseball game. What's the name of the team that you had the gear on last week or 2 weeks ago? The Chinoogas?
Well, I had the Texas Rangers, but I was telling you there was a team called the Flying Chonkless.
That's it. The Flying. You
can
take your kids to that event and just. But the important thing, and I'm serious about this because I just came from a Boston Red Sox game that my wonderful wife and I and our friends went to. Half of the stadium was not engaged. They were in their phones. Be engaged in life, have fun in life, but get stuff done.
Right.
So Hey, listen, I love these podcasts. Hopefully you got some value out of this. We've got everything in the show notes about Ben, how to find the books, how to find great legal marketing, how to attend. If you want to buy the book, please go to Amazon. We got the link in the show notes for you for that. If you want to learn more about somebody that we hold dear to our lives, Dan Kennedy, we'll have a link to Magnetic Marketing. You could get probably a copy of the newsletter for cheap or for free, just to read it. Get his books, get Ben's books. Let him know if you reach out to him that you heard him on this show. But most importantly, folks, if you want to be a sales maverick and a marketing rebel, or vice versa, right? If you want to be a sales rebel or marketing magnet, you got to do things differently, right? You got to have a code. You have to look at what everybody's doing, all your competition, what they're doing in the marketplace, and do it differently, right? Ben didn't get into that, but that's great legal marketing, is doing things differently. He's a prolific writer, right? I think he's got 14 books. And some of them are philosophical, some of them are lead generation books, right? So become a writer. He's got a podcast, The Renegade Lawyer. Did you hear his TikTok? His TikTok was The Renegade Lawyer, right? And so he's well branded. It's not his name. He's doing things differently. He talked about his recovery from, he didn't have a heart attack, but they found, and so he had some blockages.
It would have been a heart attack. Yeah.
Right. And so, but he documented that, right? So one is that's differently, because some people would be very private. They wouldn't talk about that. But if we saved one or two people by somebody hearing that, and, so if you think about what the great marketers do, what the great sales mavericks and marketing rebels do, they look at the world and they go the opposite way, right? If everybody's doing X, they're going to do 1, 2, 3 and do it over and over and over again. And folks, if you don't have a podcast, you got to get one. Reach out to our sponsor, which is Pina Colada Media. They are the number one. We got their links in the show notes for them too. Marco, it's a joy. It's a privilege to have you at the helm. I feel safe. I feel like, right now, today we are recording this, and 3 humans are going up into, I think they're leaving Texas or Florida, and they're going up into the moon, and they're going to be the first humans to be spacewalking, right? It scares me. I wouldn't do it, but I feel like how they feel. I got you at the controls, and it's a safe flight. I'm going to be good going up there.
I'll be your Elon Musk. How about that, Dick?
You'll be hey man, I couldn't get your number if you're Elon Musk, but you're a gentleman and a scholar, and I appreciate that. Folks, if you like this, please like it. Wherever you listen to it, if you listen to it on YouTube, if you're listening to it on everything, please like it. Send us your comments. And most importantly, if you got somebody you want to be interviewed, or you want to be interviewed, just send us a note, right? We want to give value. If we could do things better, please let us know. I'm going to be talking to some great minds next week with Marco, or it'll just be you and I talking about all things. We got a lot of stuff going on in the world of media, on marketing, on social, you name it. So we always got things to talk about. Most importantly, folks, entrepreneurs, small business owners, if you don't have a podcast, go get one. Thank you for being a sales maverick and a marketing rebel. Looking forward to next week, Marco.
See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Sales Mavericks and Marketing Rebels. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Keep pushing the limits in your business. And remember, the Mavericks and Rebels are always ahead of the game. Catch you next time.